Oh, g'day again. More talk about clearance, which you guys are probably getting very sick of, but that's something that we need to know about. Now, again, we know that in order to work out clearance, we need to know the plasma concentration of substances. We need to know the urinary output of the substance, so what the concentration of substance X in the urine is equal to, and what the flow rate of the urine is, and so on. But what we're going to do here is we're going to look at a couple of special cases to try and work out what the clearance is. Now, we know again that the clearance of substance X is equal to the concentration of substance X in the urine multiplied by the flow rate of the urine over the plasma concentration of X, or how much the concentration of X is in the plasma. So I guess I should do X concentration plasma just to get my symbols right. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at two substances, or two different types of substances. Now, the first thing we can look at is albumin. Now, we know we have plasma proteins, albumins and so on, and that under normal circumstances, what happens to those? Do they get filtered? No, they don't. They can't get filtered. The glomerular capillaries and the glomerulus, the whole structure there, does not enable them to pass through into the Bowman's capsule. So because of that, the concentration of albumin in the urine is going to be equal to 0. So therefore, if you do the clearance calculation, it's going to be equal to 0 times whatever the flow rate is of the urine over the concentration of albumin in the plasma. Now, of course, all these values don't really matter, because here is the important value. There is no albumin in the urine. So therefore, if there is no albumin in the urine, its clearance is equal to 0. You don't clear it at all. The kidneys don't do anything with it. It can't enter the kidney. It doesn't get cleared, so therefore its clearance value is 0. So therefore, substances that are not filtered and are not secreted into the kidney, their clearance is always equal to 0. There are also other substances that are filtered and readily filtered by the kidney, but under normal circumstances we won't see a clearance for them as well too. Now, I'll give you a classic example of glucose here. Okay, so again, we know we have glucose floating around in our blood, depending whether after a meal or before a meal or so on, but we have a certain concentration of glucose in our blood, and glucose, we know, is freely filtered into the kidney, no problem at all. So the amount of glucose that enters the kidney is totally dependent upon its concentration in the plasma. Now, again, normally we're talking about the clearance here of glucose is again equal to the concentration of glucose in the urine multiplied by the urine, the flow of the urine over the concentration of glucose in the plasma. Now, again, before we even worry about the concentration of glucose in the plasma or anything, what we do is we measure, and if the person has no glucose in their urine, this value is equal to 0. So again, the clearance of glucose would be equal to 0. Now, why should someone's glucose concentration of glucose in their urine be 0? Well, because of course we know that we have massive reabsorption of glucose in the proximal tubule of the kidney. And as long as everything is functioning normal and the person does not suffer from hyperglycemia, or they're not diabetic or so on, then you would not expect to see any glucose pass by the proximal tubule without being reabsorbed. And so therefore, the clearance of glucose in the non-diabetic person, you would expect again to equal 0. Why? Because a substance that is freely filtered but totally reabsorbed, so freely filtered but totally reabsorbed, its clearance is also equal to 0. So the two rules here, if the clearance is going to be equal to 0, there's two reasons for it. One, if it's albumin, it is not filtered at all. So it doesn't even enter the kidney, and it's not secreted in later on either. So that will definitely not give you any clearance. Nothing is cleared at the end. The second are substances which are freely filtered, or filtered at any extent. They're filtered, but then once they enter the nephron, they are totally reabsorbed back into the blood. They're not secreted, so no residual amount of that substance reaches the collecting duct to not be removed, or to be removed in your urine. So therefore there's none of it in the urine, so therefore the clearance must be zero. Remember, if the substance is not in the urine, if there's none of it there at all, it means that there is zero clearance of that substance.